Hello, my name is BJ Paris. Welcome to Tapping Into His Treasures. No, I didn't get punched in the eye. I think I ruptured my eye. A few days ago I was rubbing it and I rubbed too hard, and today I woke up and it was all puffed out and it hurts a lot. So I'm okay, and hopefully I'll get through this okay. Thanks for joining me. Today our theme is, I think, a very interesting one. It's about the prophets of old, and I am an Old Testament gal, so this is right up my alley. We may wonder what a subject like this how it would relate to us today, but it does. You'll see. Just give me some of your time and I'll show you some things that I've learned that were very fascinating. I wanted to pass them on to you. The prophet Isaiah was told by God to walk through the streets naked for 3 years. I know that was symbolic of what God was going to do to the people if they did not listen to him, because all of God's messages through his prophets were symbolic. But two things: when they arrest someone for walking naked in public, even for one time, let alone for 3 years, that I don't really understand. There's got to be an answer for that out there if anybody wants to mail me an answer. And the other thing is, just picturing Isaiah doing that, I can't imagine him like running to hide behind a barrel here and running to hide behind some shrubs there. To me, he had to be mortified. But he had to obey God. No? What do you think? I know that we're not supposed to question God, and I don't. Yet I still just shake my head at that particular oddball kind of thing. The prophet Jeremiah was called to be a prophet before his birth. His call was more of a struggle than the call of the other prophets. God would not allow him to take a wife or have children, which was his desire. It was devastating to him. There was conflict in his family. He walked around with a yoke around his neck. And that was also symbolic. Now picture these yokes, you know, the real long pieces of wood that would have the place to put around the neck of the ox to hold them in place so that they would walk side by side in step with each other. Well, that's the kind of yoke that he had around his neck. And that was kind of strange, wouldn't you say? But it was also symbolic. It symbolized the yoke that God was going to put on the people if they didn't listen. Jeremiah had no problem shouting out the words of the Lord in public. He was undaunted by the threats against him. He was imprisoned on one occasion. He foreshadowed future captivity. He complained to God about people not listening. Wouldn't you? Muddy cistern, in chapter 38 of Jeremiah. Remember, he was thrown down into the muddy cistern? I remember before I even learned about that, when I read it on my own 39 years ago, I just pictured this poor man down there in all the mud and slime. And, I mean, you got to really picture this. It wasn't like a artesian well. It was like a long, deep pit. And even to see anybody at the top of it, he had to really look way up and could barely see them or hear them. That's how deep down he was. And I remember God put it on, the story is written that God put it on somebody's heart. I forget the man's name. He was a black man, I believe, Ethiopian. And he went to the king and asked if he could take Jeremiah out of the well and take him home with him or take him someplace and feed him. And the king agreed. So when he went to him, he brought a whole bunch of rags with him. And he said to Jeremiah, put them underneath your arms as we put the ropes there to pull you up. Obviously, so that he wouldn't get rope burn or it wouldn't cause any pain. It would lessen the pain. And when I read that 39 years ago, I said to myself, wow, that is so God to have somebody do that, to say that, recommend that. So to me it was like grace, God's grace. So there he was down in the dungeon. Jeremiah had a heavy heart for the people. He was most pessimistic, and he was very emotional, often called the crying prophet. But he was also courageous. Ezekiel was the last of the major prophets. He had visions and dreams. I just want to read 2 verses from Ezekiel chapter 1. They would be verses 12 and 20. Well, let me just read this first so I don't get ahead of myself. He had a vision of creatures in wheels in Ezekiel 1:15. So now let's go there to verse 12. And they went every one straight forward wherever the Spirit would go, and they went, and they turned not when they went. And over in verse 20, wherever the Spirit went, the creatures went, and the wheels rose along with them. For the Spirit of life of the four living creatures, acting as one living creature, was in the wheels. So what that means to us today, or to me today especially, is, I hear my phone ringing in the background. I meant to turn it off. When we follow the Spirit, He wants us to go straight ahead in our thoughts, not to go to the left and not to go to the right. And that's exactly what these words in Ezekiel were telling us. To follow the creatures with the eyes and the wheels. Simple. Let's see. Ezekiel did bizarre things and had a touch of madness. He was told by God to eat the scroll with his words written on it. Does that seem a little odd? Well, God had him ingest the scroll so that when he spoke, the word of God would come forth. Ezekiel had a vision of the creatures in wheels in Ezekiel 1:15. The vision may have been odd, but God knew what He was doing, because here we are thousands of years later, and thousands of years later, and we're still gleaning from these verses.